Yeah.
So you start the book by talking about the Garden of Eden and calling it a sacred space. What do you mean by that? The garden as a sacred space, and
Yeah.
why is it significant to view it in this way?
Garden makes us think of something in our modern day that won't really help us as we try to get to Genesis 2 and 3. When we think of gardens, we think about people tilling rows of dirt. They're ready to plant seeds. They're ready to water these things. They're looking to harvest time. They're thinking about gardens in those ways. In the ancient Near East, when a king would plant a garden, it was not just about rows of dirt. It was a paradise. It was a luxurious, beautiful, and expansive location. And here you have the Lord, the King of heaven and earth. He has made the world. He's put his image bearers in a place called Eden. And in Eden, he plants a garden. He's going to put Adam in the garden. From Adam, he's going to make Eve. And so these image bearers will be in this garden. So this is not just like a set of rows of dirt, okay, where people are going out where they're planting and tending stuff.
Mm-hmm.
This is a paradise. And in the midst of the garden, there are trees, which means two trees, which means we're to envision a very luxurious space, okay? So that's idea number one, is just trying to calibrate our thinking away from maybe what a modern garden brings to mind. And in addition to that, later scriptures employ the language of the eastern entrance, like in the tabernacle and in the temple. And an eastern entrance was first used in the Garden of Eden because Adam and Eve are exiled from Eden, and the cherubim with the flaming swords are on the eastern side to prevent re-entry. You also have Adam placed in the garden in Genesis chapter 2 and in verse 15 to work it and to keep it. And in the first 5 books of the Old Testament in the Torah, to work and to keep, they occur as verbs separately, but when they occur together as a pair, it's intriguing where later texts will use this pair for priestly work at the sanctuary of Yahweh, which means Adam is a kind of proto-priest. He's a priestly figure who's also required to subdue and exercise dominion and to expel what would be unclean, such as this, wily serpent that ends up in the Garden of Eden. There are various elements of this garden, including not just the tree imagery, but things like gold and jewels that are employed in places like Ezekiel 28, where the Garden of Eden is depicted as like a sanctuary all those many centuries ago. Now, that could be a big paradigm shift for readers. The Garden of Eden, we might not have thought about it in sanctuary-like terms.
Mm-hmm.
If we think of a temple, we might think of something where there's pillars, there's walls, that's the temple, it's enclosed, something like that. That's not quite the picture we have with the Garden of Eden, though. It can still be sanctuary-like. It can be called something like a proto-temple, a temple before there were typical ancient Near Eastern temples.
Mm-hmm.
And another reason that this is confirmed, I think, in the biblical text is because the presence of God dwells with Adam and Eve in this garden. A temple, a sanctuary, is what it is because of the presence of the deity. So in the ancient world, if somebody, went to a temple, they believed that the representation of their deity was there, that matter, or the very power and presence of the deity was there. So for these reasons, Aaron, it's good for us as interpreters to consider the Garden of Eden in temple-like categories, sanctuary terms. And if we do that, I think that opens up more understandings, windows of insight as to what's going on in that sacred space.
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. And I think it is, like you said, a paradigm shift for a lot of us who, growing up, whenever we heard it taught in Sunday school or read it, and we read garden, we think of, like you were saying, rows of dirt. We think of basically a farm, and Adam and
Right.
Eve were God's farmhands, but not what you're describing. And I think there's incredible implications of that, especially what you were talking about there, Adam as a proto priest, placed in the garden to work and keep. I'd love to come back to that later.